Sam, if we had a spaceship, the Podpodcastcast spaceship.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here.
Imagine. Podcast spaceship.
I'm
We're
going to-
in space. We're the only 2 crew members.
This is.
Do you think we'd kill each other?
Oh. Yeah. No. Do I tip my hand early?
And also, who would survive?
Welcome to Podpodcastcast. Hello, and welcome back to Podpodcastcast. It's a podcast where we review podcasts. I'm Sam.
I'm Honor.
And today we're talking about space, spaceships, space lasers,
Yeah.
guns,
Yep.
aliens.
Yep.
I mean, all the hits, really all the, everything everyone wants to know about space.
Yeah.
Except, the Force.
Yeah, no force.
No Force. No Borg.
Kind of, a little bit.
No Klingons.
No.
So actually all the rest of the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We are talking today about Wolf 359, which
Deceptively doesn't have any wolves in it.
nor really the number 359. Oh, no, it does. It literally
It
has,
does.
Wolf 359 in it.
Wolf 359 is just not a wolf.
I don't know. That's true. Listener, I don't know if you can hear the tension in the room today.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the kind of the biggest sound that we give out
Yeah.
at any given episode is tension.
Yeah, I feel like we're just holding eye contact a lot.
We're holding
more
eye
aggressively
contact
than normally.
because I mean Honor's intro there kind of frightened me. It was basically like, "Hey Sam, how well do you sleep at night? Do you think you'd notice a knife going into your back?"
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't think I would, so I can't fall asleep anymore, which is usually what I do on these episodes.
Yeah.
No, there's a little tension in the pod sphere today. That's where we live. That's our dimension. Because Wolf 359 is the first ever Podpodcastcast certified perfect podcast. 5 out of 5.
5.
It was the rating that Honor gave it on. What episode was that? Was it the one with Elizabeth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Stellar app.
It was
Nothing but good reviews.
That was a great episode. And so Honor had been telling me for a long time, Sam, you got to listen to Wolf 359. And listener, I've done it. I've listened to it. I actually, at first, you told me 6 months ago now, started listening to it. And I listened to a couple episodes, and it bounced off me.
Yeah.
I got 3 episodes in, and I was like, I'm good.
The first episodes are a little rough around the edges.
Yeah. And then I got it. I'm like, okay, this is Space Podcast. Okay.
Space Podcast.
And then, Honor gives it the perfect review,
Mm-hmm.
which shall henceforth be known as The Incident. And I was
I don't like where this is going. I don't like your tone.
I don't know, incident, kind of divine providence, however you want to spin it. There was a happening. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to listening to Wolf 589. And now I'm 80 years old.
Yeah.
And I have completed it.
Yep.
And so we're going to talk about it today.
Sam aged. I didn't, but
yeah.
He's an old man now.
It's alarming to just slowly realize that one of your friends is a vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really what our relationship has become.
Yeah. I love that I could just stare at Sam and go, yeah, and eventually he'll break.
That's not true. Don't establish that. So Honor, what I want to do today, if it's good with you, is I want to go do our normal kind of a brief overview, sans spoiler, and then go into the plot. This is a big one. And this one this is the biggest podcast that we've both listened to the entirety of.
Yes. I will be transparent and say I listened to it a long time ago, so there are parts that I won't remember as well because I also have a notoriously horrible memory. Yeah,
I listened to it very recently, and there's going to be many parts I don't remember because it was, for me, 80 years ago.
Yeah.
But we're going to go over the general plot structure. There's 4 seasons. We'll talk about those, and then we'll kind of talk about our feelings because I think we both have many feelings about this podcast. Perfect.
What if I said no, I'm not okay with that?
Hey, Honor, what do you want to do today?
I should have caused problems.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So Wolf 359 is a sci-fi audio drama.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, I would say, fairly well known in that sphere.
Yeah.
I mean, we are both audio drama fiends, some might say.
Yep.
Audio drama suckers, others might say.
Yeah.
People are really giving us a lot of labels, and I wish they would stop.
Yeah, I said it in my initial review of it that, like, if you're in the audio drama sphere, you've probably seen the name Wolf 359 and been like, oh yeah, there's that one podcast that I could never go look up to listen to because it's Wolf and a bunch of numbers.
Yeah, I would definitely say, I think if you're in the looking for sci-fi audio dramas, if you're looking for, like, Veggie Tales, Adventures in Odyssey, you're not going to come across Wolf 359 naturally, but it's pretty well known. It's fairly popular.
It got brought up in one of my classes before.
Whoa!
I didn't even do that. I did that in another class.
Shocking. It's an audio drama that focuses on a crew of characters in the USS Hephaestus. And the Hephaestus is a station that orbits around the real life star, Wolf 359. Hey, Honor, do you want to know how I learned that Wolf 359 was a real star?
How?
Because I Googled Wolf 359, and then I came across the Battle of Wolf 359, which was in Star Trek, which is when Starfleet fights the Borg. Yeah, and
that's crazy.
And then I learned that Wolf 359 was a real star, and this was not made up place.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
We should go for research.
Sorry, I like that. That's our road trip episode.
Yeah,
is into deep space.
Yeah.
Wolf 359, real star. Our crew orbits around it on a scientific mission, and kind of the gist is Wolf 359. Like, the themes change over time. There's 4 seasons. It goes on for 3.5 years, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah. And so kind of what it's about changes, but mostly it's about a crew, and the people on the crew are kind of oddballs in some way or another usually, and they're up against some opposition, usually just like how hard it is to exist in space.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the shtick. Wolf 359 has pretty rich characters. You get to know these people fairly well over 3 years or 61 episodes if you listen to them all.
Yeah.
It has a total runtime, I think, of somewhere around 30 hours or more.
Yeah.
So
somewhere around there.
It's pretty lengthy. It took me about a month or so, or maybe more, to listen to all of it. Of course, I was not plugged into the Matrix to consume it, which is, I know, how Honor consumes her podcasts.
Yeah.
And Honor just downloads them into her data banks.
Yeah, you're saying 30 hours is a lot. And it just isn't.
It so is.
It's not.
That's such a long time.
It's like a pretty normal podcast length for like an audio drama.
Hey, listeners, I need you to come in. I need you to come in on this one.
Please tell us, because we have such different standards.
We really do. 30 hours is, that's like almost a full-time job that you're getting to.
Yeah, it's normal. Like, how many hours does it take to read, like, a book series or something?
A book series?
It's multiple seasons.
This is true. This will come up later.
It's a pretty normal length.
I think it's fairly long, but it's not you're right to point out that this is not a book.
Yeah.
This is several books. This is not, we're telling one like short, finite story.
Yeah.
You are going to the store, picking this up again and again, and really getting invested in the characters. So it is a different experience, and I think that's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to mention in the spoiler-free overview before we hop into it?
It's freaking silly. These characters do really silly things, and I think that's part of the appeal, is they are incredibly deep characters. Also, It is humorous. The first episode, they fight over to a toothpaste. Which also is part of, like, they're very human and relatable characters. It's not, like, super heavy drama.
Right. That is a good
like,
thing to point out.
Yeah.
It is, in some ways, comedy, which... It's almost like a dark comedy in some fashion.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's, making light of the characters constantly in peril, right? They're like, we're all going to die. And it's like, yeah, but what about... my toothpaste.
Yeah.
What about whatever silly thing that's going on?
My pack of ciggies.
Yeah. So in some respects, it is a comedy. I think there's certain episodes which are almost no comedy.
Yeah,
especially
for sure.
as you go on, the plot develops and it becomes more serious.
Yes, but it's not just like jump in, be ready for deep space drama,
right?
Existential peril. It's like more approachable than that. You don't need to be like, I'm ready for an epic tale.
Yes. This is not like the Lord of the Rings of sci-fi, and it's not trying to be, which is good.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go ahead and enter the spoiler section. If you want to leave, you can. I will usually tell, or often say, go leave. Go listen to the podcast, come back. I'm not going to say that about this one.
That better be for a good reason.
I think it is.
Okay. I do think I think it's a podcast that does pacing and stuff very well, where even if you know what's going to happen, it's still well worth the experience of listening to. I don't think like knowing the spoilers or anything would ruin it at all, because it's still just really fun and good to listen to. That's my 2 cents.
I can. So yeah, hopefully if you are going to go listen to Wolf 359, you've gone. We're going to go over the plot. We're going to go over the plot at a high level. This is a long podcast, to me at least. And so we're going to go over the seasons, kind of what goes on in there. And then me and Anna are going to talk about our feelings about it and some of our favorite parts. Season 1. Anna, you remember how season 1 starts? You pointed it out earlier.
Yeah. They're on a spaceship. You hear the voice of Doug Eiffel, the communications officer of the Hephaestus. He's making his daily logs, and he's chronicling the fact that there is only one tube of real toothpaste left on the spaceship. And he has locked himself in a single room with it and is refusing to leave because the rest of the crew wants to share, and he wants this piece of humanity.
Yes, you kind of immediately get the sense that, 1, you're on the space station, and 2, things are not going great.
No.
So season 1 introduced us to Doug Eiffel, communications officer aboard the Hephaestus, Commander Minkowski, Renee Minkowski, who is in charge of the Hephaestus, and then Dr. Elias Hellberg. Is it Elias?
Dr. Alexander Hilbert. He's a funny little man. I like him. But there's a 4th character.
A character that I will perpetually forget about. The ship's, they say autopilot, but AI in charge person, Hera.
Yeah. Hera.
So we get to know these characters in the first season, and it's kind of it's a very episodic. It's like an anthology. So it's told through this premise that it's always Doug Eiffel's audio logs, a la Star Trek. And you nerds are out there, it always begins with Captain's Log, Stardate, 4279.
It does?
Oh, like a lot of them, yeah.
I didn't know this about Star Trek.
That's where this comes from. It's borrowing from Star Trek.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so it's supposed to be his like personal diary, and that's the premise for all of season 1. All of the stories are just him talking to you,
dear listener,
as he says, kind of chronicling what's going on in the space station. And there's not a lot of continuity between these. It's like, today I walked outside the spaceship and I almost died.
Yeah.
Today I was inside the spaceship and it blew up and I almost died. It's pretty consistently like today I was kidnapped and experimented on, and I think I died. It's a lot of that. It also through this premise of the logs.
Yeah, it also is pretty clear that like he's been doing this for several years now, and he fully believes that no one actually listens to or cares about these logs, so he just goofs off.
Right.
It just says whatever he wants to say.
They're like a year and a half into their mission.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of fun things that happen in this first season. There are good gaffes, a lot of funny episodes and premises, including like a plant monster that gets loose, and most of it is kind of treated for laughs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until the end of season 1, which is when Wolf 359 decides that it has something that it wants to say, which is the crew, namely Doug Eiffel, discovers that there is a radio broadcast of Earth music coming from a star that is not Earth.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my gosh, there are aliens. Mm-hmm. At which point, Dr. Alexander Helberg tries to kill both Minkowski and Douglas.
Yep.
And uses Hera, like, hacks her brain to try to do this.
Mm-hmm.
The crew stop him, but they have no idea why he did this.
Uh-huh.
And, like, everything is thrown into chaos immediately.
Yeah.
Things were not going well before, but now it's like a fourth of this crew has tried to kill everyone else.
Yes. Yeah, I also want to talk about real quick, there's a turning point in season 1 where not only it's the first time that you hear from it's not a log that Eiffel's giving, which I think is a good thing that they're not like super stuck in this format.
It was a very good choice to pivot away from that.
Yeah. So it's episode 11, which is called Alone. I believe it's 11, maybe 12. But it is, you hear these vignettes, monologues, whatever you want to call them, from each character about their experience on the spaceship through different channels of talking about it and being alone or being not alone. And it kind of is the first thing that like has a little bit of a heavier tone and an idea or like an implication that like it's not just going to be an anthology, like there's something actually happening here. Because also Hilbert has a very suspicious, mysterious, what is he talking about part in that episode.
Right. Which does hint towards what happens at the end of the season, which is this big betrayal.
Yeah.
So that's season 1. So mostly goofs, a little
hint.
Intrigue.
Yeah.
And then we have this big plot point. And then season 2 starts with Minkowski and Eiffel have regained control. The Hephaestus have locked Hilbert up and getting help from Earth, where they talk to what you immediately realize is a very bad man.
Yeah.
Which they write this pretty well, that it's like you just by the way that this person talks, and some like just a few of the things they say, you're like, okay, I think this is very evil.
He has just such an awesome, like, flamboyant villain voice. And just being like, true. I don't care at all.
This podcast truly loves a evil character that seems kind of nice to you.
Yes.
They do that a lot. They
it's
really
so
like that.
Good.
They are introduced to Mr. Cutter, who is the head of Goddard Futuristics, which is the company that has funded this mission.
Yeah.
We'll get to a lot of I have thoughts on the world building later, but that's the bit. So he's the big guy in charge, and he's like, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. I actually don't care at all. You have to stay there. I'm not rescuing you. Yep. So the rest of season 2 is mostly the crew of the Hephaestus constantly repairing the Hephaestus from the damage it took during this Hilbert's little mutiny, repairing Hera, trying not to die with all the other stuff that's going on.
Yeah, figuring out what they want to do with Hilbert.
Right.
Which there's so much interesting stuff there because I don't remember when they introduced the fact that like Hilbert has been using Eiffel as like a host for a virus or something that he's working on.
Right.
Which is, I just think, such an interesting like plot. I loved it so much. I don't remember if it was more in season 1 or season 2. I know it's at least in part in season 2 because it's like this guy tried to kill them but also if they don't let him like deal with this medical thing that he's already put Eiffel under, then Eiffel will die.
Right. So to kind of talk to this subplot you're talking about, Hilbert has given Eiffel, has infected him with some virus that Hilbert is like, this will like stop death. Like this is gonna.
This will like cure cancer and like.
Yes.
Yeah.
This if we engineer this the right way, it's gonna save thousands of lives.
Mm-hmm.
And Eiffel's like, what?
Huh?
It's like, yeah. So just don't. As long as it doesn't get out of hand, you're not gonna die. But if it is, you're certainly dead.
Yeah.
So there's that whole subplot. There's a lot of subplots that weave in and out through episodes. Will appear in one and then duck back down for the other.
Mm-hmm.
The other big thing that happens in season 2 is the introduction of Captain, not Ada Lovelace. I don't know what her first name is. Isabel Lovelace. Ada Lovelace. Cool, real person. Isabel Lovelace was the captain of a previous Hephaestus mission.
Uh-huh.
And she comes out of deep space in like an escape pod that was launched from the last mission.
Also, this is how the crew finds out there was a previous Hephaestus mission.
I think
I'm pretty sure.
There's a episode previous to this in which they find out that there was like a room that's been like cordoned off.
Yeah. Kira, the ship's autopilot, doesn't know that this room exists, which is also like, huh?
Right. So Captain Lovelace appears on the ship, is crazy paranoid because the last Hephaestus mission went really bad because, again, they were betrayed by command on Earth. And so she keeps the crew hostage by, like, tying a bomb to her heart. And if her heart stops, the bomb goes off.
Isn't that awesome?
That's insane.
I love it so much.
I believe that you do. And so for, like, kind of the back half of the season, Captain Lovelace is forcing Minkowski and Eiffel to help her fix her escape pod so they can all go back to Earth because the Hephaestus is a death trap.
Yeah.
Like, but under threat of, I will blow us all up. Mm-hmm. At the end of season 2, there's some repairs going on. Something happens. Lovelace gets hit with like a piece of shrapnel, goes unconscious, dies for a short period of time. Eiffel's in the escape pod. It explodes. The escape pod. Yeah. He manages to survive it. A piece of the escape pod, but it's jettisoned away from the star, further into space, and they lose contact with him.
Yep.
Whoa.
Ain't that crazy?
We're halfway there. Yeah. Season 3. We've got a plot. This is kind of my. If I was to summarize this podcast to someone, I would say season 1 and 2, the writers are finding their footing. Season 3 and 4, I can believe that they figured out what they want to do, or a direction. So
that's very fair.
Season 3, Eiffel is blasted off into space, does some crazy shenanigans where he freezes himself in cryostasis repeatedly, and then unfreezes himself. Eventually, gets picked up by the crew of a ship called the Urania. The Urania meets with the Hephaestus, which they're all really sad because Eiffel's dead. They're like, oh no. And they're like, Eiffel, you're back. And he's like, I am. And the crew of the Urania are like, hi. And they're like, we're going to go home. And they're like, no. And they're like, what? Huh? We get to meet the crew of the Urania, which is Colonel Kepler, Daniel Jacoby, and Alana Maxwell. Right before we started recording, Honor said, my favorite character is Mr. Jacoby. And I don't...
Mr. Jacoby is a funny
That's what they call him.
They call him Jacoby.
Or he says, Mr. Jacoby.
I guess Kepler does.
Oh, yeah. That's what he does. That's also my Jimmy Stewart. It's coming back. I'm doing more Jimmy Stewart. Yeah, Jacoby's there, too. For Honor's pleasure.
Yeah. He's a demolitions guy.
He is a demolitions guy. Yeah.
Which I love that they have in space.
Truly. So, Colonel Kepler is
the boss man. I think a good way to sum up Kepler is there's like posters that the team behind Wolf 359 put out for like every character, and his has just like a glass of whiskey. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So all these guys are MI5, which is supposed to be this black ops, like top secret kind of spies situation. And so Kepler is like the guy, the spy master who knows all these secrets. And Jacoby is his demolitions guy, his right-hand man. And Alana Maxwell is this AI expert.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically what they say is they're like, hi. So we heard that you guys discovered aliens. Command's really interested.
Mm-hmm.
You have to stay here.
Yeah.
We will not let you leave.
You cannot go home.
We're going to do alien stuff now. And we're going to make contact with aliens. And if you get in our way, we will kill you.
Yeah.
So help us.
You don't get to go home. You'll just die.
Right. So now we're kind of back in season 2 again, where the crew of the Hephaestus is now under the thumb of the invader, which is now the crew of the Urania. Captain Lovelace now is actually super awesome and cool.
Yeah.
She's sad that she killed Eiffel and is so glad that he's back.
Yeah.
Season 3 ends with a mutiny. You could probably guess that this was going to happen. The crew of the Hephaestus mutiny against the crew of the Urania.
Mm-hmm.
And people die, which is not, like, has not happened so far, despite all of the things where they're like, we're all going to die. First time people die.
Yeah.
Dr. Hilbert, dead, exploded.
Dead, yeah.
Dr. Maxwell, dead, shot in the head.
Yeah.
Which is awesome that there's really an anti, PhD bias on this podcast.
Yeah. And Lovelace, right?
Oh, yes, Lovelace dies.
Yeah.
I forget that Lovelace dies. Lovelace is also shot, but Minkowski and Eiffel finally have control of the Hephaestus again. They've subdued.
And Hera.
And Hera. I'll always forget Hera because she's...
Don't you dare.
When I'm imagining the scene, she's never there because she's not a person.
She's everywhere.
Yeah.
Because she's not a person.
Right.
That's her whole thing. You.
Truly accurate. Kepler and Jacoby are then thrown in the brig.
Mm-hmm.
Season 4. Okay. This is where things are
crazy.
They're getting even more crazy. Season 4 starts with Lovelace coming back from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
This is when we find out that Lovelace is not a person, but in fact an alien duplicate of the real Isabel Lovelace.
Yeah. That's why she came back from deep space and everyone was like, she was like, I tried to go to Earth and I ended up turned around and came back. She's an alien replica.
She's an alien replica.
Real Lovelace is dead.
Whoa. Which is got to be a strange experience for you.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about that at length where she's like, am I a person?
Yeah. Well, they talk about it, but she gets over it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
She's like...
The conclusion is kind of that, you can't answer the question and it's irrelevant if she is Lovelace or not.
Yeah. Which I don't know if that's the correct conclusion or not. But then we finally, after 50 episodes, we get a huge lore dump on what's going on.
Uh-huh.
Kepler's like, all right, here are the logs. They apparently, humans have come into contact. So in this world, humans have been exploring space for some time. At least since the 70s, deep space. Outside the solar system. And so at one point, humans have come into contact with these alien duplicates before. And so we get to learn all about them. And we're like, whoa, this is crazy. And maybe they're evil. Whoa. But that doesn't really affect how the crew of the Hephaestus behave at all. They're like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So then basically the first half of season 4 is them dealing with the fallout emotionally, largely, of the mutiny in season 3. And then halfway through, skabam, we have more characters.
Yeah.
We have Cutter and Price, Dr. Price, which are the heads of Goddard Futuristics, which is the company that owns the thing, plus a bunch of lackeys that no one really cares about.
Yeah.
Rachel Young.
It's like secretaries and stuff.
The Australian guy. And then a bunch of people that were human but now have been made into robot cyborgs.
I forgot about them.
They were there. They were there for all of 3 episodes or something.
Not long.
Not long at all. Then there's so much that goes on there. Eiffel falls into the star on purpose, makes contact with the aliens, because that's how the aliens travel.
Yeah.
Is via a
they're
star
inside
network.
The star.
No, they're not inside the star. They're at a different star, but that's how they travel.
Yeah, but you go inside the star to find them, which is just crazy to me.
Definitely doesn't make a lot.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's unique. It's unique for sure. Eiffel learns all about the aliens, what the aliens want. They want to study Earth because they like our music.
Yeah.
He comes back. The space station's been taken over. He's like, what the heck, man? The crew of the Hephaestus finally get together one last time to overthrow the person who tells them that they can't die, or tells them that they can't leave, or that they will kill them.
Uh-huh.
And so finally, in the final great big battle, the crew of the Hephaestus, they kill Cutter. They don't kill Price, but they kill all the rest of the dudes. All the bad guys are dead.
Mm-hmm.
Price gets her memory wiped and has amnesia, as does Douglas Eiffel, which is the character you care most about in the whole wide world.
It's so heartbreaking.
I'm gonna say,
don't.
Moderately emotional.
Guys, I was so sad. If you have a heart and aren't Sam, you'll be so sad. It's devastating.
And then finally they go back to Earth. Which is the plot of Wolf 359. That's what this is.
That's the plot.
There's so much.
Very briefly.
There's so much crazy stuff that happens. There's so many subplots.
Yeah.
There's so many personal arcs.
Yeah, I was going to say we didn't really go into like what the characters' deals are, but I would say it is a very character-driven podcast. Yeah. So that's part of why, like, when you go through just the plot, it's like, this sounds crazy and, like, it doesn't even really tie all together. But it's a lot more of the, like, personal plots, like you said.
Yeah, so now that we've covered the plot, I want to talk about how we feel. Because we've got really...
I need to hear what you think.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to have you talk about your characters. But I got some things. Wolf 359 is a very well put together podcast. Mm-hmm. It is very well produced. Mm-hmm. The sound effects are, and how they come together to really make you feel like you're in a scene. Excellent. Really among the best in the Podoverse.
And the voice acting is incredible, I think.
I think, by and large, the voice acting is pretty good.
I think it's fantastic.
I think there's some...
Sam and I disagree.
I think we're going to disagree on several points here. Doug Eiffel, Zach Valenti is the name of the guy who voices Doug Eiffel.
And also Hilbert.
He voices Doug Eiffel and Hilbert. And they're so different.
Yeah.
And so good. He does an excellent job.
It's so good.
He does a very, very good job. I love
in all fairness, Zach Valenti is the main one that I'm talking about when I say there's fantastic voice acting, because he's also the main one we hear.
This is so true. He does such an excellent job. I mean, just across all different whatever he's in, almost every performance he gives across every episode is consistently superb.
Yes.
Like, that's not, that's a hard thing to do, and that's a real professional. Like, he's so good. There's some voice acting, less good.
Yeah.
I like the character of Renee Minkowski. The voice acting sometimes does not work very well. Commander Minkowski is supposed to be this kind of, like, she's supposed to be kind of a follow the rules kind of person. But every once in a while, that character needs to be put in the position of, like, oh man, my life is falling apart. And I just think the voice actor doesn't make a great transition to that.
Nah.
It's
I don't think I ever felt like that, but
yeah, it was enough at least for me to notice. There's other actors that I really like. I think Jacoby stands out as a very good.
I was about to say
Noah Mazer. He does a great job.
That guy.
Michelle Agresti does a great job as Dr. Maxwell. I love her.
She's very emotive.
Absolutely. Every time, no matter what emotions she's supposed to have, she's doing a great job at it. She makes me... what's so powerful about some of these voice actors is that just with their voice, I can more clearly imagine the whole scene.
Yes.
Their tone, but also some of just the small things that we all do in speech that you don't think about when you're just talking to a guy. just can bring a whole scene to life. I mean, that's so much more lifting than a voice usually has to do, and some of these people do really well. Other actors do a fine job.
Yeah. I also want to say Scotty Shoemaker as Cutter, just like
Really
it's
good
not the
performance.
same as like all the emotions, but just like such a good villain.
Absolutely. I mean,
such a good villain.
So
it's so fun.
He does a great job of being like, "Hi, I'm your friend. We're gonna be friends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to kill you."
Yeah.
You know?
It's awesome, and he likes like iced coffee.
Yes.
He like goes to Starbucks. It's awesome.
If he said, "I'm going to shoot you, and then I'm gonna go get a pinkety drinkety from Starbucks,"
that's so on character.
I wouldn't blink. It's definitely his
He's
kind of character.
going to go get a pinkety drinkety.
It is such a great performance. So, Wolf 59, excellently produced, largely well acted. I would say on the production side, I might mildly note that sometimes they use especially early on, I noticed it more. They use some sound effects over and over again.
Yeah, the early episodes, the sound effects are not my favorite.
Right.
But they figure it out.
Yeah, and they use like the same thing generally. Like I think it's the same door opening sound on Hephaestus.
Oh, yeah.
Every time they ever need it.
But it's like an easy cue.
It is.
You know what happened.
Right.
The door opened.
Yes. You start to like, you're like, oh, this sound played. I know someone came into the room. I get it. So it's a very well put together podcast, but it has some problems.
If you say so.
I do say so. So there's kind of to me a big one, but I want to start with some of the smaller things I feel. One, this podcast has kind of an internal logic problem. I think that, I mean that in a couple of ways. I mean, in some of the world building, things don't make a lot of sense, and you kind of have to just go with them. I texted Honor when I was listening to this.
Yeah.
Honor was like, save it for the pod, but I just kept going, they're in the Air Force? Why are they in the Air Force?
Yeah.
Cutter says this project cost me millions of dollars with an M. It is a deep space station, and it cost him millions of dollars.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
He's a businessman.
That doesn't make the Honor.
He's
that doesn't
getting
make any
deals.
sense.
He's getting discounts.
That's not how this works. And there's also like this strange aesthetic of that it's 1970s technology, but also far future technology, but also it could just be taking place in 2015. It's really unclear when this is set and like what expectation I'm supposed to have. And
I've yet to hear a problem.
Separately, those things aren't a huge deal, but to me, it's like, it just feels like the rest of this world was not thought out super clearly. That is not a big thing. I know I'm a persnickety sci-fi lover, and I'm like, what is going on? I want to understand like the deep like space bits of it. What is the world like? Because that's what that's a classic thing about science fiction and speculative fiction is to imagine what does our future look like? What does the world look like?
Yeah.
And embrace that. Whereas this kind of it has these things of eternal logic that I'm like, what is going on? Like for whatever reason, Cutter's ship has rotating decks, if this makes sense. Like it has these rings, which is like a real thing that people have like posited for like space travel to do gravity, but that implies that the Hephaestus doesn't have gravity on it, but it doesn't make any sense if it hasn't, because people are just walking around on there all the time. Like what? Why did you even mention that? I don't understand.
I mean, I do think that's a fair point to bring up, especially if we're saying like this is a good sci-fi podcast, because a lot of people are going to want those things.
Sure.
That's not the strong point of this podcast.
This is
for sure.
This is true.
That's just not the strong point of this podcast.
I agree.
And like in my experience, it didn't matter.
Exactly. And I don't think it will matter for many people, but
It matters to some people.
It mattered for the Air Force. The Air Force. Okay, I understand that this podcast was made before the Space Force became a branch.
Yeah.
Why? Why is it the Air Force?
You know. What's past air?
Anything, dude.
Space.
It's just like I don't.
It's just Air Force Plus. They're just flying more.
So, to me, there's this logic problem of the world building, but there's also this logic problem in frequently what the characters choose to do. There's a lot of times when the characters make a choice, and I'm like, this is stupid. They should not be making
they're
this.
idiots.
But they're not. So for
There's
Eiffel's stupid. Eiffel's supposed to be
Eiffel's stupid.
He's supposed to be an idiot, and I love him. Wow.
Love
but
that
there's so
idiot.
often with like.
I think that's a line. I think "save our idiot" is a line.
Of course it is, because he's a buffoon.
Yeah, it's so great.
But there's sometimes when they're like, "All right, this is what we're gonna do," and it's just dumb. Like, of course, there's the classic like the hero does something reckless. You know, like when the crew of the Hephaestus have to pilot the Hephaestus on manual mode through like this really narrow band where they're not going to fall into the star and they're not going to hit radiation. They're like, whoa, we have to make this crazy maneuver. Like, what? I'm not talking about that. Yeah. I'm talking, forefront in my mind is the last episode. Mm-hmm. The last episode, the crew of the Hephaestus have been given the Soul, Cutter's ship, to go home. They don't, because they're going to stop him from doing evil. Mm-hmm. He wants to make a deal with the aliens. And be like, I want your alien tech, or else I'll kill every human ever.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, we're going to go back on the Hephaestus. And their plan, this is their plan, is that they're going to take out the engine from the engine so that the space station falls into the sun. Part of their plan is that the demolitions expert plants a bomb almost as a distraction. He plants a bomb to destroy the engine.
And isn't it awesome?
Yeah, you know what's a smarter plan? Blow up the station. He has a bomb. It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense why that is their plan.
Not a big enough bomb.
Honor. What? You just gotta.
I support anything that Jacoby decides to do.
Yeah, so he should.
Jacoby's also an idiot. To be clear,
he's not an idiot.
He covers it up better. He's a little bit of a buffoon. He kind of just really wants to blow things up.
I don't know about that. The whole crew decides on this plan, which doesn't make any sense and necessitates them going back in harm's way when they could have just blown up the space station. There was no plot reason they had to do that, and I think this happens several times throughout the podcast when the writers have an idea of where they want the characters to end up, but they don't give the characters good enough reasons to be there, so that for me it's frustrating. And like these, I feel like I'm smarter than these characters, which is annoying. I love Midnight Burger in part because I'm like, I would have never have thought of that. That's so interesting. You know what I mean? And in several times when the crew of Hephaestus makes a decision, I'm like, this is totally purposeless. There's no reason that this has to happen at all. So
I also think that's not an unfair point.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think I cared.
Yeah, it really bothered me. It really bothered me. Because when the whole... I don't know.
It definitely... I think when you get closer to the end of the podcast and stuff starts to get crazier, that's when it's more like... Like, that's also part of why I have trouble remembering it, is because I'm kind of like, how did they get from point A to point B? I don't know. They got there.
Yeah. So there's one other problem I want to talk about. Then there's what really wraps this together for me, which is a big problem. Mm-hmm. So this podcast is really good at cliffhangers. And God bless him for it. Every episode ends on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I would cry if I was listening to this as it came out.
Yeah.
Because I would just curl up and be like, no.
Yeah.
But I had the sweet relief of it was posted in 2017, so I didn't have to do that, right? But in some ways, that's also every season is kind of bookmarked by a large plot development on either side, or maybe a couple episodes in.
Yeah.
But then there's this problem of between those big plot developments, nothing happens. Like, I it's not a...
Was that a problem?
To me, yes. I think there is like some good reasons and some good logic to it. You know, a lot of time passes, and they're like categorizing. They're kind of chronicling this time that goes by. They're developing some of the new characters they've introduced, and they do those things. They develop these characters well, but when so much of this story is built off of intrigue, which is what it is. Since the end of episode or season 1, it's like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And they get to season 4 before they explain kind of any of it in a real way. It's not entirely true, but
yeah, I disagree.
Yeah, but there's so much of when they're like, whoa, there's this big intrigue. All right, put that aside. Stop thinking about the interesting part of this. Now we're just going to go do other things. It's like, you've made this really good cliffhanger. You've made me super interested. And I have to just now listen to everybody talk about their feelings. Which is fine, but
that's the best part.
It's frustrating for me. When you've set up this really interesting plot, right? And you're like, this is where we're going. And then you just take a break from it. You totally separate. So that we can
I didn't feel like it was totally separate.
I felt like a lot of times I'm like, what are we doing? We're just spinning our wheels
maybe.
here. You know, because especially season 2, so much of season 2 is repairing the Hephaestus from the mutiny. And it's just like, I'm sad that he is gone. This is a bummer. And that's like fine. But
yeah, you also glossed over that in your summary. But like, that was a character who was like dead for a bit.
Yeah.
How could you care about Dust Chrysalis so much and you don't even care about?
Because Dust Chrysalis was constantly progressing its plot. There was constantly somewhere it was going really fast, and I'm like, I'm along for the ride. I'm so ready to see where we're headed. And it wasn't also asking me to be like, think about this mystery. I mean, there were some like elements that needed to be solved by the end, but this one, it's like, here's a mystery. And they do say so often, they're like, we can't think about that right now. And it's like, that's why I'm here. This is the interesting part. Like, I want to see how these characters interact with this plot in this setting. And they interact with the setting and they interact with each other very well. But so often, like, you could skip large parts of this podcast and it would not affect the story. And that for me was like, oh, okay, so here we go. Here's where I'm coming to.
Uh-huh.
All right?
Okay.
It may feel like I'm nitpicking. I hope the listeners can hear that I have my arms above my head in some sort of like falcon attack position.
Yeah. Or trying to not get shot.
I've kind of got claws out.
Well, you've made claws now.
Okay.
You did it before.
I am afraid
you were just like...
I'm afraid that you will see me as a threat and take me out.
Uh-huh.
To me, the big problem that if it feels like I'm being nitpicky, it's because there's this other problem to me, which is Wolf 359. I'm going to say it. It's a long podcast. It's 61 episodes.
It's not true.
It's a commitment. You know, you could stretch it out. If you're like, I want to listen to it over like 3 months, you'd be like, you know, every once in a while, perfect. You know what I mean? This might be the perfect tempo for you. But it establishes a mystery, like an intrigue, and then all these things, like characters doing things that don't make sense, you know, that are like bad decisions that don't make sense for their character. And the fact that there's a lot of times where this plot and this mystery isn't developed, to me, is exacerbated by the fact that it's so long. It feels like those things don't need to happen. And I have to just kind of be like, dude, what? You set up this thing, and now I have to wait until you get around to it. And it's taking a long time. I started season 3 or season 2. I think I started season 2. And I got like halfway into it. And I stopped for a while because I'm like, there's nothing is happening. I just didn't keep me hooked. And once we got back to the Urania episodes, I'm like, okay, I'm interested because it feels like we're going somewhere again. The season 2 is like they're trying to get off the space station but they're also wrestling with Isabel Lovelace, who's trying to get them off the space station.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why is any of what? Why? Okay, why are you guys not just being like, hold on, let's think about this, let's talk about this? Like, what? Why are we just spending so much time plotting and conniving and talking about what happened previously?
Because these are paranoid people.
Yeah, but it's not that interesting to be paranoid, and they're also
I thought
not
it
even
was.
that paranoid.
Lovelace strapped a bomb to herself that would go off if she died.
That's absolutely insane. Yes, I get that. That is.
These people are super paranoid.
But also, sometimes they talk about this, that they're like, maybe the radiation with the star makes people paranoid. They have some episodes where they, especially in season 2, where they all are paranoid. But again, it like for no reason. Like, there's no reason that they should be this paranoid. They're on a space station.
They're on a space station.
That doesn't make people paranoid.
It does. People get, like, there's that isolation of there's only, like, 4 people on this space station. They have these strained relationships with each other because they're forced to be around each other all the time. They have these jobs to do that are tedious and unfulfilling. It's like all of these circumstances. I think that's what makes it interesting to me, is it's like these circumstances and these people who are circumstances that it's in like, okay, how does it make these people act? And then there's big plot points that come in and change that. And it's like, okay, what's the new like status quo? How are you surviving day to day?
Right. So how about you talk about that? Because I've kind of laid out my big feelings about this podcast and my frustrations. But I know that you really love this podcast.
Yeah.
And you really love, the characters and stuff. So
yeah,
tell me why I'm wrong, Honor.
Gladly.
Please.
Gladly. I do think one fundamental thing that we've come to realize about us, co-hosts of this podcast, is that we have very different standards for what a long and short podcast is.
That's so true.
And for sure, in no small part, I think it is just a difference in preference. I like a slower story. You like a faster story. Doesn't always work. But I do think if we're comparing to Dusk Chrysalis is 1 billion people are getting killed. This guy's shooting off nukes. It's crazy. It's like a war with like one person who is a whole army. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's 14 episodes and you're going. Wolf 359 is not about that kind of thing.
Right.
It's about people who have to live in these circumstances. For me, I think the first point where you lost me and I wasn't like, that's not unfair, was when you're like, nothing happens between these like things. And I'm like, that's kind of the point, is that it's like, okay, this thing happened. Now you just have to like kind of deal with it. And there's not an immediate solution. And that's the tension and intrigue of it, is that like you have to keep going in your day to day. You have to figure out 3 meals a day. You have to sleep at some point.
Yeah.
Even though there's like this crazy person with a bomb strapped to her who's like running your ship, you still have to like live. Like,
right. Yeah.
You just, because it also just keeps coming back to, there's this theme of like humanity and what it means to be or not be a person this whole time. Like, plot that, I can't believe that you don't care about Hira, because I think she's so interesting.
I don't not care about Hira.
You're hesitating.
Keep going.
Hira she's constantly explicitly exploring like, am I a person or not? And having that conflict of being like, am I just a tool? Am I just ones and zeros? Also, she has this whole arc of, even as she's being like, I'm not entirely a person, like I just complete tasks, she's also like, there's a glitch where she's failing to complete tasks, and so then she's like, I can't even like not be a person the right way. And it has all these different things, and then it's like, okay, maybe that is why I'm a person, is because I can have these failures. And that's just with Hira, and I just barely scratched the surface of things she talks about and talks with other characters about. And then, like, Eiffel is, at the center of it the whole time and is the one who most is like, he's such a normal guy. And he wants to just go be a normal guy. Like, of everyone on the space station, he has, like, no credentials. He just, like, likes... He just, like, likes music and radio and makes all these references to movies.
Right.
Tons of pop culture references that I did not get. But were so funny anyways.
Absolutely. Even if you don't know him, it's like, all right.
That's Eiffel.
Big boy in the Sweeney Boppers. Okay.
Yes. It's so good. And then I love the plot with Hilbert and him being like, because when you listen to him talk, it's like, yeah, he's trying to save a bunch of lives by growing this virus inside of Eiffel's body, which might kill him. So that's a bad thing. But, like, he's trying to do a more gooder thing. Does that fix it? And I think the dynamic with him and Eiffel is so interesting. Of Eiffel hates this guy because clearly he's doing unethical things to him. Also, Eiffel has to keep letting this guy take care of him, which is a crazy thing to be like. And it's again that thing of like, there's no just solution for it, because Minkowski talks about just like killing Hilbert, and it's like, we can't, like, you can't just like shoot a gun and be done with it. You gotta keep living life, and it's complicated and messy. And I feel like that's the thing with so many of these. And even when it's like they figure out, oh, there's this like intrigue mystery, it's like we don't have like a database to just be like, what's the answer?
Right.
Which I'm oversimplifying, but I felt like that was part of what I loved about this podcast, is that it really, in exploring humanity and isolation and all of these things, it creates this environment of things go wrong and then you have to keep living life.
And I think that's an interesting theme. I just don't think a lot of that interested me very much. I agree with you broadly that I think the characters in Wolf 359 are generally well done. And they are textured, and each of them has something that you want to know more about. There's no guy, except I will say Rachel Young, who has nothing of interest.
No, she's just like she's the secretary, right?
Yeah, like assistant, but also like evil assistant.
Yeah.
Other than that, all characters are like, you're like, oh, this feels multidimensional. This feels realish, and I like learning more about this. Yeah. However, the developments that they try to explore with some of these characters are hit and miss for me. Hilbert, some of the developments with Hilbert I think are really interesting, or at least kind of fun. Like, they call him like a rat. Like, he'll always survive, which is something that...
He's a cockroach.
The character Hilbert doesn't really start that way.
No.
But they kind of make him more that way. But it also, I can see it in my mind, that he's always like, how are we getting out of this? How are we getting out of this?
Yeah.
And he's always plotting and planning. But some of the things that are like really interesting with Hilbert are he's so motivated by his work on the Decima virus, this thing he's given Eiffel. He's so motivated by that. He's kind of blind to everything else. And it's some of the discussions where Eiffel and Hilbert have about it, about why, because Hilbert killed everyone else on the previous Hephaestus mission. And he's like, that was regrettable, and I didn't like it. I actually felt really bad about it in some ways, but I also don't think that matters. I don't think any of that matters. I also really like that when he goes into that room, the room that we get in season 1, it's like, what is this spooky room that it's all just me by myself? He goes in there, and it's like, Cutter's like, hey, okay, so you must have killed everyone else. Great job. Love you, pal.
Yeah.
We've made this room so we can read your brain, and then we'll transmit it back to Earth, and then you're going to die here.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy, so insane. For me, that scene does two great things. One, it characterizes Cutter as really uncaring.
Yep.
Which you kind of already get that, but he's like, even if you've like worked for me, it doesn't really matter. I fundamentally don't value human life.
Yes.
Right? And two, Hilbert's reaction to that was like, great.
Yeah.
It was
Hilbert's like, that's the job.
He's like, I don't want to die, but if my work can survive, if they can get my brain, they can see what I've learned. This is good. This is good. So I think like those scenes, great. And I'm like, what a crazy perspective to have on a human being so motivated singularly by this thing. Other scenes, constantly Hilbert is shut down talking about his motivation.
Yeah.
The amount of times in season 2 and somewhat in season 3 that Hilbert is punched so his dialogue ends.
Yeah.
Is aggravating.
Isn't it awesome?
I also have to say, so there's other explorations of other characters. Some I don't really care. Like, Eiffel was a drunk driver one time, and he killed a kid. And, like, Renee Minkowski's like, oh, I'm not going to talk to him. Like, what the hell are you talking about? You've known this guy for 2 years. You're on a space station. You're not going to talk to this guy? What are you in middle school?
He killed a kid.
Whatever, dude. Get over it. I'm just like,
that's the funniest thing you've said.
Yeah. My point is, I can't believe that in this situation the characters care. You know what I mean? There's so much else going on.
I mean, that's part of, I think what's interesting is because it is like, Minkowski, come on. But she's like so stuck on these like values she has.
But she does, okay.
Even when it is idiotic. It's like.
But she never establishes this value set. This exists solely for her to be weird and these characters to not be on the same page for a couple of episodes. Like, that's, you know what I mean? If I felt like Renee Minkowski was like, I am a strict prohibitionist. Thou shalt not consume alcohol. You know what I mean? And they had to overcome that. I'd be like, cool. You know what I mean? That's clearly there's this obstacle, and it's these characters like have to overcome this somehow because they need each other. But what happened there was a thing that the writers wrote for there to be a sad backstory, and then Minkowski reacted to it how she needed to, not how I felt her character dictated that she should. That was, I was like, that's what I mean when I'm like, the characters make decisions that don't make sense for them. I'm also going to say, the exploration of Hera, I think, is not that interesting. Dude, I'm so sorry.
We got to stop this podcast.
We got to stop the pod. I know that's not... Hera is, from the beginning, fundamentally believes that she's a person. And, however, she
doubts it.
She's also really incompetent. Or moderately incompetent. They keep talking about how big her brain is, but she's, like... She's just a person. Like, you could have had this character be in the pilot seat somewhere, and nothing would have changed. Her being a hyper brain, like they keep talking about how super smart she is, it doesn't change anything. And that for me was like, I didn't think it was an interesting exploration of what an artificial intelligence could be.
I thought it was.
That's okay. So that's how I felt. Anyway. So I know you wanted to talk. I do want you to talk about what's good about this podcast because I think you can do that better than me. And to be clear, there's a lot to like here. There really is. You are.
Good. Thank you for being correct.
You know, I think there is a lot of good character work, and I think you're right on that.
Yeah.
But for me, there's a lot less than I would have liked.
That's sad for you. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I said most of it, which is just that these characters are super compelling to me. The way that they are extremely flawed. I think I've always had this thing where it's a repeated thing that I've noticed about myself through, like, middle school, high school, where people will be like, characters in this story make decisions that don't make sense. Like, they contradict each other. And I'm like, people contradict themselves. Like, people don't make sense a lot of the time. Like, I think about choices I make, and I'm like, why did I do any of these things? These things don't make sense. So, like I get that, like, if it's totally random, then it's like, who even is this character? But this is also just to say, like, I think that's a thing that doesn't bother me as much because, like, this is just a trend of mine, is to be like, people are really weird and flawed, which doesn't always work for like what people like in a character is not always what lines up with like what are people like.
Right.
There are other ways that like people have these tendencies, and I'm like, I don't care. I don't want that in a character.
Right.
So, like I said, a lot of the things you said just aren't things that bothered me. Which could say something about me, or it could say something about you, or it could do both.
It definitely does, and I think it's good that we are both on this podcast. You know what I mean? Because hopefully, dear listener, if you've listened to this podcast before, you understand which brain between the two of us you're more like.
Oh my gosh, I would love for people to...
Everybody write into podpodcastcast@gmail.com and tell me which co-host are you?
Yes. We should make a BuzzFeed
also,
quiz.
email in podpodcastcastpod@gmail.com.
Yeah.
How long is a long podcast?
Please tell us.
As an audio drama. You know, I know there's some of you out there that are going to be like, I just listen to my weekly pods about news or whatever.
Yeah, that's a different thing. An audio drama... How long is long? How long is short?
Yeah.
Tell us, please. I need this perspective. But yeah, I agree. I think it's good to get the meta and talk about our own podcast. I think it's good to have two very different people to be like, yeah, we don't always agree on what's good about
I was just talking to somebody who started to listen to Wolf 359 because of your recommendation.
Yeah.
And
because it's good.
And I don't know if that was funny for anyone else, but just that look was priceless for me.
You're so welcome.
Somebody that started listening to Wolf 359 because of your recommendation, and they were like, they listened to the first episode, bounced off it, listened to Alone because you said that was where you should start, and they're like, oh, we're in.
Yeah.
Alone for me, kind of whatever.
What? That's crazy to me.
Alone was fun. I liked. There was some parts of it was fun. Again, I think the person that was least interesting in Alone to me was Hira.
Interesting. I feel like most people think Minkowski's the least interesting.
I think Minkowski was super interesting because she's like.
I think she's awesome.
Yeah, well, in that episode, because she's like, you know, Hira, check out of the room.
Yeah.
I'm sending a message to my husband. 1, husband, interesting. 2, she's been stuck in a time loop. Quoi? Yeah, and then they wait 3 seasons to bring that up again.
Yeah, she was stuck in a time loop.
Which is, it's just like, okay, that was interesting to me because like there's something greater going on here. I want to know more about this. And there's likewise with Hilbert, but there's other parts of that I was like, I cared much less about. So anyway, I was talking to somebody who had started listening to it, and they're like, you know, that episode's great. I'm going to keep going. Whereas I would listen to that episode, and I was like, it's thoroughly whatever. That would not have been the episode to hook me.
Yeah. Whoever you are, person who listened to my recommendation and came back a second time to try again, you're incredible. And you should talk to me because clearly I know what's going on. And I'll be better to talk to about Wolf 359.
Maybe. So I think there's that person out there that'll be like, I'm honor pilled. Like, this is gonna be a great pod for me.
Yeah.
But if you're Sam pilled, this is not the pod for you.
Yeah.
I think Wolf 359 is
particularly if you think 60 episodes is long, which Sam does.
It's 60. I mean, if it was 62-minute episodes, whatever. This is, you know, like every episode is 20, 30, 40 minutes long, and it gets longer the later in the series you go until
That's
the last
very
episode
standard.
Until the last episode is 2 hours long because they're like, we have to write an ending,
the finale.
So,
yeah.
Honor, how would you rate this podcast?
I would rate it the same. 5 out of 5 pods.
A perfect rating. Me? 2.75.
Be careful
out of 5.
now.
That's where I land.
Really? I thought at least 3.
I want to give it a 3. I really do. And if it had a better ending, I would. some parts of the endings are good, but also I'm a destinations man, you know.
Mm-hmm. I'm a journey person, so
yeah, the journey is more fun. Where I'm like the destination is worth it. The finale, Cutter has super speed, dude, and he can block bullets with his hands.
Yeah, man.
What?
Isn't that awesome?
What? And they erase prices and
where's
Eiffel's
your
mind?
whimsy?
Dude, that's what? These are like they just don't why?
No whimsy.
It's just ugh. I mean, that was fine. Like, it's kind of like when you get to the end of Return of the Jedi and Emperor shoots lightning, but Cutter blocks bullets for some reason. And for no reason, by the way. But somehow he doesn't think fast enough to do other things. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Also, the mind wipe, I know I just was saying this. Purposeless, absolutely purposeless. They were just about to come in and shoot her anyway. Like, all Hera had to do was stall. Like, it just, these things, I'm like, they don't. It was okay. Oh, God. Minkowski. Sorry.
What?
Minkowski sending Eiffel on his spaceship to go home. Also purposeless. Like, it just. No reason that these things happen. So.
But they did.
They did. It's what's most fresh in my mind. To me, most of the middle of Wolf 359 is a 2.5. There are certain elements that raise it high. There's certain parts that are good and I really like, but there's a lot that I feel really middling about. And the ending was all right to bump it up. Like, one of my favorite episodes is when he just goes talks to the aliens. Because I'm like, this is such a super interesting exploration of like what like alien contact could be, but also it's done with this character that I really like and is a little goofy boy.
The goofy.
Which is great. But we
really didn't even talk about Eiffel that much.
There's so much to talk about, dude.
There's so much.
It's a long podcast.
It's regular.
I disagree.
It's regular length.
So, yeah, that's where I would land. I would say this is not, for me, this is not a recommend. I would say you could listen to this. I would say there's other pods that are better and that you would are better bang for your time buck.
Dear listeners, email us at podpodcastcastpod@gmail.com to tell Sam why he's wrong. Because I know there's so many people out there who have listened to Wolf 359 and love it.
Love to hear from you guys. You can also leave us a review. 5 stars.
So true.
Sam is terrible at this.
Yeah.
We'd appreciate that greatly.
Leave me 5 stars.
Honor is awesome at this.
Or Sam, I guess. If you're a Samite.
The rival camps.
Yeah.
So, perfect. A contentious pod.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, sometimes, as my therapist keeps telling me, you just got to scream at people.
So true.
Perfect. Honor, thank you for potting with me. Thank you for showing me Wolf 359.
You're so welcome.
Despite I had a lot of objections, there are parts that I really like about this. And I
am glad you had some
that
you enjoyed parts.
And I really enjoy getting to talk to you about it. If I listened to this by myself, I would be deeply saddened.
That would be sadder.
But also knowing that you like this makes me feel happy because then I could be like, what?
Awesome.
Perfect. Awesome. And listener, you are awesome. We will see you on the next episode of Podpodcastcast. Bye-bye.
Bye.